So Catherine spent the last 20 years at a very famous literary agency, and she was both an agent and an in-house editor. She's worked with a ton of talented writers, often in the mystery genre, so very relevant to our group. She's currently working as a freelance editor. She works with authors in a very personal and I would say intuitive way. I've been working with Catherine for the last year, so I can attest. I can give her a 5-star review here right now.
Nice.
She has a great ear for dialogue, excellent at helping with character development, and I think also combining her publishing savvy and her ability to provide really good actionable feedback is incredibly useful. So you're in Woodstock, New York, right?
Pretty close. For all intents and purposes, yes, that's where I am.
And you have twin boys that are teenagers.
I do. They're 16, and they are wonderful and impossible. As I'm sure you all have experienced with, or many of you.
Yes. And a dog, 2 cats, a snake, and 3 rats. Is that correct?
Sadly, not the 3 rats anymore.
Oh,
They have very short lifespans.
Well,
I did have them, but they died very quickly.
yes. Yeah. Well, an animal lover nonetheless, right?
Indeed, yes.
So we are just going to do a Q&A today. So as we're kind of talking, if you guys have additional questions, please feel free to come off mute and break in with a question. But I think the first thing I'd like you to talk about, Catherine, is what is a developmental editor and why would an author need one?
Sure. And please forgive me. I made a lot of notes in anticipation of this, just so that I wouldn't get nervous. Sometimes I get a little nervous when I have this kind of thing. So if I look away, it just means I'm looking at my notes. A developmental editor is 1,000 different things. I mean, just for fun, I Googled developmental editing on Google before this meeting, and as many different websites as there are the different ways to define it. But basically, a developmental editor is an editor who's going to work with more than just your sentence structure or proofreading. They're going to talk about things like story development, plot aspects, when to reveal things. They're going to do dialogue. They're going to do world building, depending on what kind of genre you're in. They're going to do everything. They're going to give you deep and substantive feedback on your novel as a whole and as the parts relate to one another, structure, everything, really everything.
I was going to say, in particular, for when you and I've worked together, I really do appreciate when you're like, I don't think the character would say it like that, or I don't think, because you really do get in the mind of the character, and you're very helpful. And even with the plot, you're like, maybe we should introduce this a little sooner in the story. So I think that's incredibly helpful.
And it's been very interesting working with you, Mickey, the way we're working together, because I haven't ever done it before. I don't know if you guys know, Mickey sends me a couple of chapters periodically instead of me getting the whole book. So that's been a different way of doing it. I think you sort of said that it was the like a personal MFA for your book, which I love. So that's another way that you can, there are so many different ways you can approach a developmental editor and have them work with you. And as many editors as there are different ways and flexibility, willingness to be flexible in what works best for you at your moment.
Susan, did you have a question?
Just that if you had a preference, because I wondered about that, because I know that you two are working together, and whether that's a challenge to make some of those evaluations if you have not seen the whole book yet. Like in terms of, should this be revealed now versus later, et cetera?
Right. That's a great question. Again, this is the first time we're working together. And my assumption is that this is the first draft, and that that once Mickey has finished the whole book, I'll go through it all again, and then we'll decide about it as a whole instead of it as chapters. So there'll be a second round, with us, I hope. I mean,
Yeah, and I think for me, this is the first time I've ever written anything like this. And I think I needed the added boost of confidence that Catherine gives me, that I'm headed in the right direction. I think I would have abandoned this a while ago if I hadn't had someone with her level of expertise saying, no, keep going. This is good. I like this story. That was tremendously helpful for me.
And all true, just all
Thanks.
true. One of the things that I wanted to say is that there are, there are these different kinds of editing. There's developmental editing, there's line editing. And I don't know if you guys know what the difference is, or even if there is, there is a difference, but often an editor will do both. And line editing is when, instead of sort of the larger issues that you edit, you're really looking at sentence structure, and the way you say things is really important. So that is also a big part of editing is whether the sentence structure is working for what you're wanting to say, whether it's powerful the way it should be powerful. There are all sorts of ways of constructing a sentence that can really pack a punch. So the role of a developmental editor and a line editor is to make sure that the writer's voice is the most powerful that it can be. It's not my voice, which is one of the things you run into, is editors get enormous egos, really, like as if they're the writers, or better, better. And they want to put their fingerprints all over the books, and they want, and that's not a good editor for you.
But I think the line editing is critically important too. And I think one comment that I see from you with some regularity is goes with she'll highlight a sentence and say goes without saying. And I always have this desire to explain to the reader, like, oh, she was upset, she was confused, she always highlights and says goes without saying. Respect the reader, essentially, to infer this on their own. And so that has been incredibly helpful. So you talked a little bit about the difference between line editing and developmental editing. We have a couple terms here, copy editing and proofreading. Mm-hmm. Are those dramatically different? Can you kind of give us a definition there?
Yeah, proofreading is absolutely what you'd expect, which again is something that a good editor is going to do. They won't be able not to. So if you have misused an apostrophe, we're going to fix that. If you've written there instead of there, or it's instead of it's, that's proofreading. It's the sort of granularity of language, not the structure of it. And then copy editing for me is something that happens, and again, you see different things online, but for me, having worked in publishing, copy editing is something that happens at the very end. There'll be, once the manuscript has gone to press or has passed for press. So it might be in galley form. It might be in like a bound manuscript form. A copy editor will go through it and it's a whole different language. There's a language of copy editing. It's a skill set. And they'll go through and they'll check for things like whether any editor would, but whether you said July in one place and August in another. They'll make sure that your paragraphing is correct, that you don't have four indents instead of 5, all sorts, whether there are the right spaces in between each paragraph. That's copy editing to me. It's much more technical.
Got it. And I think it's important especially for new authors to know, I think a lot of people I've spoken with, they get their first draft done and they feel like, that's it. It's going to get published. I'm going to be famous. It's going to be amazing. And when you talk to authors who've actually been published, they're like, yeah, this is my 6th time I've dealt with this story and I had to change the point of view and, blah, blah, blah. So I think if you go into it knowing that that's going to happen, you're a little bit more prepared for those comments you're going to get.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Talk to me about what you like about editing. What makes you like want to do this?
You know, I've been editing since I was like 9 years old, because my mother was an editor at Viking for years and then an agent at a literary agency. So I've been looking at manuscripts forever. It's treasure hunting. It's treasure hunting in a very basic way, in that it's exciting to read a manuscript that might be great.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's treasure hunting on a second level, because it's exciting to read a manuscript that will be great. It's like finding something. I mean, it's exactly the way you treasure hunt, right? You find something that's a little rough or that nobody has seen, and you help the writer polish it. Like, you're not supposed to polish a Tiffany vase, so never do that, because apparently the patina is really important. But if you were to find a coin, you polish it and you make it the best that coin, not a different coin, the best that coin can be.
Mm-hmm.
And I love that. I love that. It's and it's funny, it's different. There are 3 different places that I've done this. Actually, there are more than 3, but I've done it from the agency perspective as an agent, which is really exciting, because like you might make money on it. And
right.
That's really exciting. And then I've done it from the publishing perspective in a publishing house, a traditional publishing house, where you might get respect from it. And
right.
then you do it as a freelancer, and it's just, you're doing it because it's really, really fun and interesting to do.
Mm-hmm.
So those are the reasons. That's the reason. It's a treasure hunt. I like antiquing. Some
Mm-hmm.
people like it better. I like editing better, but I do like antiquing.
What do you not like about it? So the reason I'm asking this question is, what do authors do that make editing really difficult for you, so that we all kind of have a cheat sheet of what not to do?
Okay. So there's first of all, that's totally unfair. There's nothing I don't love. I would, but there are things that, you see that are like seeing, if you're sitting with a friend or on a date and then they get spinach in their tooth. There are things that you see that sort of make you feel bad, that's embarrassing for everybody. And those
right.
things are things like spelling errors, but it happens. And so, there isn't really anything, okay, there is. The only thing that I really, really struggle with is when people do dialect unsuccessfully.
Hmm.
I would say I just worked with a book, and she had been through so many edits, so many different editors with their fingers all over. And somebody had told her that she should give the characters different ways of talking. And she took that literally, very literally. And so she took one character and gave her a dialect. But this was a post-apocalyptic, world building novel, and the dialect was like Old South. And it's just, dialect is really tough.
It is tough. Yeah.
It's so tough. I think characters should have different ways of speaking. I don't think that equals necessarily dialect, unless you know what you're saying, unless you're, writing Train Spotting and the dialect of Scottish junkies really well,
Right.
What else? And then, there's the sort of classic instinct, which Mickey just brought up, of telling rather than showing. But that's what an editor is for, right? And that's why it's a good idea to get an editor, just unless you're super confident. And even if you are, just do one pass and see, because your instinct is to tell. I think my instinct is to tell. I've got an MFA in writing as well. I know how hard it is to show,
Yeah.
So an editor can help that
Yeah.
more objectively than often you can.
Before I ask the next question, does anybody else have questions about what Catherine's just talked about? Yes, Susan.
I would just, going back to things like simple spelling errors, and we all do them. I mean,
Oh my God.
like especially having the same word twice,
Yeah.
right? Because you stop and you think, and then you start typing again, but anyway. But would you recommend that before you even send it to someone like if you're gonna like help a writer get to the next stage of submitting to a publishing house or something, that they, just like you would go in for an interview and your clothes are clean and you're groomed and everything, to try and get all of that kind of stuff cleaned up before they go to someone like you?
Oh, you should definitely run a spell check. I mean, that's a pretty standard thing, just because you don't want to waste my time correcting things that you already know, like how to spell the word there instead of the word over there. You don't want my time spent doing that. You want my time spent doing substantive, thoughtful editing. And so of course it's a great idea to run a spell check. That said, it's not the worst thing in the world if there are spelling errors. I mean, often I find my computer wants to spell something incorrectly.
Yeah.
So autocorrect will often make a spell. It's going to happen.
Yeah.
But if something is filled with spelling errors, it's very filled. It's very hard to focus on the content.
Yes, Sheila.
You was talking about dialects. And I've always wanted to write an Australian character, but I don't have the background strong enough for an Australian dialect. Would it be acceptable if the character was Australian but did not speak with a dialect?
Oh, sure. I mean, don't you think about the books you've read?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I read everything with an American accent, but I recognize when I'm told somebody's Australian in a book that they're Australian. Of course, in fact, I would encourage you to do just that,
Awesome.
Unless you had lived in Australia for a really long time and knew how to write it.
Awesome. Because I've always wanted to write about this character, but I can't put him in Australia because I can't, write the dialect. Was that something that? Thank you.
Yeah, no, I encourage you to make a character any way you want.
Yeah.
And again, rely on your reader's creativity and imagination to fill in the blanks.
Thank you.
In that case, would you try and, like, if I were writing somebody, like my character's Southern, I'm not Southern. So every now and then I'll put a little Southern phrase in there, not in a twang. I'm not trying to recreate the twang, but I might do a regional
word.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have no problem with that. I don't, I mean, I think that's a natural thing. That doesn't stick out to me in any way as an editor, like, oh, that's weird. Not at all.
Yeah.
So if my character said crikey, that would be okay. I'm not trying to do a dialect, but that would be, expression of, crikey, but not saying it with a dialect.
Yes, I think there's a difference between word choice and dialect. Absolutely. So
Awesome.
that I think that's the key, that that the two are different.
Got it. All right.
Wait, Jeanette had something to say.
Oh, I'm sorry, Jeanette. I'm so sorry, sweet. Go ahead.
One of my characters is trying to straighten up his life, but every now and then when he gets upset, his dialogue changes. He goes back to, talking with street references and stuff. I mean, that's not too much,
No, of course not. And if you dialect is great. Think of the greatest writers that we have as Americans, for example. Let's not even go elsewhere. Faulkner wrote with dialect. Dialect is great. And if you know the language,
mm-hmm.
and the terminology, if you know it, you can nail it. Dialect that isn't nailed. So dialect, I mean, it's hard. If you're going to write something in dialect, you have to recognize that you're basically asking for a buy-in from your reader. because it's learning a new language. It's like reading Shakespeare. It's like reading anything. It's dialect is, but if you're doing it well, your
Okay.
reader's going to buy in.
Okay.
My only issue is when dialect does not work.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, when somebody's not nailing it.
Exactly. Yeah. No, I encourage you to write your characters the way they are. Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, I had an editor once tell me do dialect sparingly and choose well when you use it, because too much can tire out the reader or confuse the reader. How do you feel about that?
I think I think again, I think that's probably very true on a case by case basis. But if you know your dialect, and for instance, you have a character who slips back into it when he gets upset, I mean, that's also a sparing use of it. But I think if, I would never discourage anybody from writing a whole book with dialect if they knew what they were doing.
Okay.
So use it sparingly. It depends on your book. It always is going to depend on who you are and what you're writing. My God, there's no one size fits all,
Yes. Yeah. I was thinking, what was I reading recently? It was Stephen King's fairy tale. And he has this particular dialect about midway in the book. And he tells, I love Stephen King because he just sometimes directly addresses the reader. And he says, you've got the gist of this. I'm not going to continue to try and recreate this dialect because you'll get tired. So just know
I totally remember that moment in the book. No,
Yeah.
I mean, King is very adept with reader buy-in and language transmission. He's really good at that.
Yeah. I'm going to switch and talk a little bit about literary agent, and then we'll give people time to ask questions at the end. So talk to me about the role of a literary agent.
So, and again, I do want to say that some of what I said about editorial was as it relates to a freelance editor. And there are differences between freelance editors and publishing editors. And just as there are differences between those two, there are similarities and differences between agents and editors. It used to be that the agent would, first of all, you didn't used to need an agent at all. And then you needed an agent to submit to editors. But then the editor would get the book, and usually he would buy your book, he'd go out and have 3 martinis at lunch, and then he'd spend 6 hours back at the office editing your book in a sort of martini haze of, oh my God, that sort of grand heyday of editorial. But then editorial and publishing became enormously bureaucratic. So agents started taking on more and more of the editorial process. I mean, everybody's going to want to edit your book on some level, whether it's minuscule or massive. But agencies, either agents or in-house editors, are going to want to do the same thing. So that said, the role of an agent is to take your book, again, make it the best it can be, polish it up, and send it to different editors or one editor, depending on whether they're going to do a large submission or a targeted submission, and hope that they get an offer from the publishing house to buy your book. And then if that happens, the agent, so if a publisher buys your book, the agent then becomes you're going to have direct contact with the editor who bought it, but you're going to have more contact with the agent who sold it. They're going to be your advocate. They're going to be your legal advocate. They're going to look over the contracts that the publisher wants you to sign. They're going to be your publicity and marketing advocate. They're going to look at the different jacket art and help you decide which one you like the best, if you get a choice of what the jacket is going to be. And then for all of that, they're going to take a percentage off net. So, the royalties that you get, which is how it works, I'm sure you'll get a percentage of royalties after the publisher has earned back its advance. So net, you'll get net. And then the agent will take somewhere between 10 and 20% usually of that net. So say you earn $10,000 in royalties, they'll take 1,500. No, yes, 15, sorry. My math is problematic. They'll take 1,500 and then they'll cut a check to you that comes from the agency. So the publishing house sends the agent the royalty check, and then the agent processes it and sends you a check minus their percentage. And you know, agents, it's funny, I've known a lot of agents, and even King, who had one of the least agenty agents on the planet, writes about literary agents as sort of being New York, hard Scrabble, you know, tough as nails. That's not been my experience with agents. I mean, agents definitely want to make money, but they could have gone into banking if they wanted to make money, right? Real money.
Yeah.
So they're in this for the same reason everybody goes into publishing, which is that they love books.
Yeah. And when you have an agent, my guess is, you know, because they're making a percentage of what you're making, they're going to push for a higher
Everything, royalties, higher royalties. Agents can push for like tiered royalties. So say you got an advance of $50,000, you earned that out, and then say for every 20,000 units you sell, instead of getting a 6% royalty, you'll get an 8% royalty. And then, you know, there are all different ways that agents can tier and set up so that you both make more money. And a good agent will do that, you know, if they can.
How hard is it to get an agent?
There are so many agencies out there. When I was sort of transitioning away from working in classical publishing in the 90s, because I went and did a couple of other things briefly, every single person who had worked for 2 or 3 years as an editor was starting their own agency. So there are so many agencies, and I think that's a great thing. It means that there are many more people out there. There are simultaneously so many fewer publishing houses because they've all consolidated, which is a terrible thing for writers and agents. But so my point is that there are a lot of people out there that are looking for a treasure. And you just have to do the research, and I can talk a little bit about that, but you just have to do the research to find 10 agents who look like they'd be a good fit for you or more. You know, there's a lot I've read and I've heard from people that you shouldn't submit to multiple agents. That's ridiculous. Never, ever believe anybody who says that to you.
Okay.
Submit to as many agents as you want, but take the time to get to know who that agent is, to go to the agency website, to research what they look for, and to make sure that you're writing their name in the salutation and that you're spelling it correctly.
Yeah. Do you, we have a couple published authors and listening. Does anybody here have an agent? I'm just curious. I've never asked that question. Nope. All right.
So you guys published without an agent? If you did.
Yes. Some people have published independently. Some people have published with smaller houses. And yeah, so I've never heard anybody in the group talk about dealing with an agent. So I was just curious.
Lynn has an agent.
That's right. Linda.
You know, she unfortunately had a conflict today, but that's the only one in our group that I know of who does.
I'm looking for one.
Well, we can completely talk about ways to approach, and I have a list, but let me just say, on the flip side of all of these big traditional publishing houses contracting, there is this incredible new world of self-publishing and independent publishing, which is really paradigm breaking, right? It offers an entirely new way for writers who feel confident and who want to be published to do it. And I know tons of writers who have had real success doing independent and self-publishing. So it's a magnificent thing.
And I'm just going to step in and say, I think it's all the more important to use an editor like Catherine if you are self-publishing, because
Absolutely.
you're not going to get the stop gates that you would normally have. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely take that. If you're going to self-publish, at least do one pass with an because you want to put your best foot forward.
Mhm.
And often publishers will see a book that's doing really well, self-published, and pick them up if that's what you wanted. Some people don't even want that. They just want to do it their own way. You make all the money when you do it your own way. I'm sorry, hold on.
You're fine.
Can you not, I'm just right in the middle of something.
I was actually just going to text you.
Okay.
So go ahead.
Sorry, my husband.
No, you're fine. Hi, Catherine's husband.
I had a question. How expensive is it to have an editor or to hire an editor?
So boy, does it run the gamut. You can go onto freelance websites. I don't know if you guys are familiar with places like Upwork and Fiverr and Freelancer. You can find editors there who can, who will do one pass of your book for $800 as well. And then you can go on to Readsy or private established editors who have worked, in the field for 40 years, who will charge you, $5,000 to $10,000. I know the agent that at Darhansoff where I worked, he charged for one particular writer, and this was a very specific case, but he got $90,000 per book. But the publisher paid that.
Right.
I would say on average, it can be anywhere between $1,500 to $4,500. More than that, you're probably paying for a name that you might not need to, but that is always, it's really about what's the best fit for you. I would encourage you to talk to different editors and ask them if they can give you a sample of how they work. That's what I always do. I always offer, like, send me your first chapter, send me your first 25 pages, and let's see if you respond to me and if I respond to you.
Mhm.
So you would go to an editor before you would submit to an agent. You would have your story gone through by an editor before you submit to an agent, or the other way around?
I would go to a freelance editor before I went to an agent, and then the agent I would have, submit me to the publisher. And I, as Mickey said, I think it's a really good idea to go to an editor if you're going to self-publish. And I think more and more agencies are also looking for more polished work than they used to. So if you can afford it and if you find a good match, there's no reason not to do it. And if you can't afford it, find somebody who is less expensive.
Right.
There are so many freelance editorial platforms out there, so many different ways to find them. And, the best way to find them is often word of mouth,
Mhm. And I'm just going to step in with some behavioral science knowledge here and say that we make first impressions in about 0.3 of a second. Our brains are really fast. And so if somebody's seeing a manuscript and it's not laid out properly, or it has spelling errors or grammatical errors in the first couple of pages, or you switch points of view. We talked about points of view today. So maybe you have a point of view switch that shouldn't be there. That agent or publisher is going to make an immediate impression of you, and it won't be good. So I think it's worth having anybody you can afford, go through it to make sure. Even like our critique group, I think, is also very good at this. Doing some line editing and giving you feedback on anomalies. But I think I think it's in your best interest to make the best impression possible when you're submitting your work.
Boy, do I agree with that. And without even just, I love the behavioral science part of everything you say always. I've learned so much about behavioral science from you, which I love. But I also just, you really want to nail that query letter when you submit to agents. So, and you really want to nail the manuscript. You do not want anything to, at an agency, what the agents or the readers or screeners are dealing with is like literally thousands of unsolicited manuscripts coming in every week, thousands. So even though they want to find a treasure, they also want to find a reason to reject you, because everything can't be a treasure. So they have to go fast. You want to, for instance, if you have a friend who has an agent and that agent that friend reads your novel and says, this is really good, I'm going to refer you to my agent, put that in the subject line, referred by your other author. Like, anything you can do to grab hold and not allow the person whose eyes are on your letter or your manuscript to let go is so important.
Mm-hmm.
And it's this, it's the same. And again, a lot of freelance editors, I know I do this, but I know a lot of them do, will help you polish your letter as well as your manuscript. Will people want to help, and people are pragmatic and, want you to be successful for their own reasons, I'm sure too.
Right. Yeah, but I think it is just a matter of first impressions, and you're trying to sell something. So you want to put your best foot forward.
Absolutely. And another thing, let me just say, I'm sorry. One other thing that I want to say about a query letter and preventing, no, I'm right in the, I don't know where he is. Okay, bye. Sorry. That was one of my 16-year-old sons. No, I had this interview for graduate school once, and I was having a Zoom thing, and I was having this they asked me what the most important thing to you was. And I was like, well, I've got this thing on my wall with like a little picture of a nest, and it says, be kind. And I think it's really important to be, and my kid, who was like 6 at the time, came in, and I was like, get out, screaming at him because I was doing this important thing as I'm saying, be kind, which I believe it's important to be kind, but I was like, get the fuck out of here, just like crazy, so bad.
It's awesome.
So I just did that again.
No, you were very kind.
Okay. So yes, I'm sorry, Susan, go ahead.
I was just, and Mickey, you may already have this in your questions, but one of the things before you would even go to a literary agent is like, what genre is this novel you've written in? And so I'm in the middle of one, and I started with the germ of an idea and am proceeding along, but I didn't think about it's this or it's that. And I'm not sure yet what it is.
Nor should you be when you're writing. I mean, it's fine if you are, but you don't have to be. Anyway, go on.
Well, that's just, I mean, like, because I don't want to write that way.
No,
I don't want to think, I don't want those rules in my head.
Oh, yeah.
No, you don't have to think about that. You don't have to think about the marketing position of your novel while you're writing it, right? That's not your job. Your job is to write your novel or your memoir or, your book.
Okay. The challenge there is because I was telling Mickey and the others in our critique group that I went just in preparation for this. I'm going, so if I Google literary agents, what am I going to get? And oh my God, it's like lots.
So many.
And it's like, well, we are looking for this kind of fiction, young adult or whatever. And so when you approach a literary agent, once you've finished your work, should you not have an idea of which one of those go in?
Yeah. No, I think it, and I think that doesn't have to be hard. I mean, there's always just calling it literary fiction, right? Or, I mean, that does not, are you Are you really lost as to what you think your genre is?
I wouldn't say I'm lost. I mean, it's not science fiction. It's not a Western. I mean, I can sort of eliminate some of the obvious. And Elaine suggested sort of a coming of age. So it could be young adult, except because I'm writing about young people. But to me, it's more, I think of it as an adult.
Yeah.
It's readable by adults. I'm not sharing it to children.
I understand. And there is a real difference between a book that is YA and a book that is about coming of age.
Right. Okay.
So yeah, I would just say that you can call it literary fiction. You can call it a coming of age story, and then look for agents who are publishing. You can even Google coming of age story literary fiction editors, or think of different ways of like, I hate to say the word, but boxing it in, even if it can't be boxed, just for the purposes of sending it out.
Okay.
Yeah, and Susan, I would say coming of age, but I don't think it's a YA book. I mean, having read your work, I don't think it's a YA book. I think it's very literary. I think, but it does have a mystery element to it too. But I don't know that I'd tuck it in there either. I know what you're struggling with. Yeah.
I mean, that's what's so annoying. And, nobody in publishing will deny that the pigeon, I mean, think of David Copperfield, right? David Copperfield is an incredible book. It's not YA. It's not YA, it's just a book that everybody loves because it's a genius book. This whole like marketing and genre thing is a challenge because not everybody can be pigeonholed into a box, but they're going to for the purposes of so send if there's elements of mystery, send it to it's a literary mystery. If there are elements of literary fiction, send it to literary fiction with you can play with it, you can manipulate it.
Okay.
Use it to your advantage.
Okay.
I have one more question, and then we'll just open it up to discussion. What are literary agents' pet peeves? What are things you do just to get on the wrong side of an agent?
Well, I thought about this question in two ways, right? Sorry.
Fine.
Page. So I thought about this in two ways. I thought of it as whether or, pet peeves in queries, which are the first and foremost place you're going to meet this agent, and then pet peeves in clients. I think pet peeves in queries are really clear, like people who did not do their research, people who misspell the name or address the person as dear agent, or don't put anything. You don't want to be creepy, but a little bit personal, saying, I know you published so-and-so and I'm a great admirer of, or, and make sure that you see what they want you to send. Like, I encourage everybody always to send both in the body of their email and as an attachment, a sample of their work. Because if they can, if their eyes, that's why I even say just put some in the body of, it doesn't, not maybe the full 20 pages, but a couple of paragraphs. Again, you just want to grab them. So I suggest that. I really advocate for making them see your work. But if they don't want a sample in their description of what they're looking for in a query letter, don't send it. Respect what they are looking for. So that's in the queries. And then as an agent, my God, it's such a different relationship. An editor there's so much gratitude between a writer and an editor, which goes both ways. But, writing is super lonely. And how many of your friends that aren't writers have read your books, right? Not that many. So when you have somebody who is dedicated to reading your book and reading it carefully, there tends to be this warmth that is between you, because this is somebody who's really taking this thing that you're making seriously and working with you on it. So the relationship between writer and editor is different than the relationship between writer and agent. That is a business relationship. So, I mean, it's also a nurturing relationship and can be, but it is a business relationship. So I thought of saying that entitled clients are really annoying as an agent, because they are, right? But that doesn't mean that you're not entitled to ask every single question of your agent that you want, right? Entitlement is not, you are entitled to certain things, but don't be entitled to all things, you know? So entitlement, I remember we had this client whose wife was constantly calling about, I mean, this was a book that had gotten a very small advance and was on the New York Times bestseller list for 4 years. I mean, it was, they made so much money on this book. And the wife called constantly about the money, like, you know, about when the royalties were coming in and about when the check was going out and about how many units sold. And that was really annoying. I mean, that took up way more time than it should have taken up. What else?
So presumptuous. Oh my gosh.
Oh my God. But you know, suddenly they had gone from, it's almost like they just suddenly had all this money.
Right.
You know?
Right.
But yeah, no, it was really awful. So, you know, those are just basic things that lack human self-awareness. I can't think of anything other than those things that are really annoying. I mean, it's really annoying for an agent when you find a book that you think is a treasure and no publisher will take it. But that's not on you guys, that's on the publishers.
Right. I think too, it's just having empathy for the other person sometimes. And, you know, anybody that's in any kind of work where you have clients, you know, the clients don't often see your point of view. Like you know, they don't often see your point of view. So I think thinking about the editor, thinking about the agent, thinking about the publisher and how much is getting thrown at them in terms of content, new manuscripts all the time, you know, people recommending. So if you're constantly calling to check on your thing, or you're, you know, you're not maybe having the empathy that this is not the top of this person's world right now. It's the top of yours, and that's great. But you can't email somebody 5 times a day about something because they just don't have time to deal with that. So
yeah, that seems really fair. Just to think about the other person while remembering that this is a business relationship and you do have certain rights. And then I did want to say also, usually just to give you the information, usually what happens if an agent wants to take your book is you'll get a contract for just that book. So it's usually just one sheet of paper and it's for that book. And if, say, the agent tries to sell the book and is not successful, then I've never heard of a situation where an agent doesn't release you from that contract, or that the contract is for like 1 year of time, you know. And then you're always free to try and find a different agent. You know, I mean, this isn't an agent, this is an editor, but I don't know if you guys know the writer Annie Proulx. So Annie Proulx, my mother was Annie Proux's agent, and she sent, I guess, was her first book, The Shipping News?
yes, I think it was.
Yeah.
So my mother sent The Shipping News to 17 publishing houses, as if there were even 17 left anymore, but 17 publishing houses rejected it. And then she's, you know, the 18th was like, yeah, okay, I'll try. I'll take this on. I'll see how it goes. And, you know, she's super famous now, obviously. So agents, you know, different editors, different agents, that you want an agent who's really going to go to bat for your book.
Yeah.
I at Prime Crime I met CJ Box, who wrote Big Sky, and then he has a Paramount series as well. But he was telling us about his very first agent. And, you know, this guy's super famous, but he wasn't back then.
Right.
And he got an agent, a New York agent, who was supposed to be selling his book for him. And he got a hold of the guy, you know, about 6 months later. The guy's like, why are you calling me? If I had something to tell you, I would tell you. So he didn't bother the guy for another 6 months. And then he went to an event and he's talking to someone and they're like, oh, he's your agent? You didn't know? He died.
Oh,
My gosh.
Well, there's so
Nobody
much
told
wrong
him.
with that story. I can't even believe that the agent said that to him in the
I
first 6
know.
months. That's just, you would drop that agent, even though I know that you don't want to drop your agent because, oh my God, you got an agent. But yeah, that's awful. That's a terrible story. I can't believe that. That's just painful.
Yeah. That is painful. All right, we've got about 9 minutes left. So anybody have any other questions for Catherine? She's got a ton of knowledge, so.
Got a question. You mentioned about editors having ego and trying to put their impression on your book. What are the signs of that you need to look out for, that somebody is doing, an editor is doing that?
Yeah, that's a really good question. What to look out for in a bad editor and what to look out for ego. I have an opinion about this. I feel like rewriting entire sections of somebody's book is an ego. I feel like making suggestions and working. So that said, there are editors who do that and who do a really amazing job at that. But that would, I don't know. Do you want whole sections of your book rewritten by someone else? If you do, and if it's helpful, then that's not a bad editor. If you don't, and it feels like it's changing, like bad editing, section rewriting is if suddenly the flow is changed. They've decided that your paragraph or your paragraphs aren't working, so they rewrite the whole thing. And then suddenly it's like, well, wait a second. Bad editors will steal the magic that you have because they believe that it needs to ascribe to a certain format because of, the way books are written. I don't know. If anything that you're writing is being changed in a way that makes you uncomfortable, that's a bad editor, I think.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Elaine, do you have any questions?
No, because I do my own thing, kind of. With the help of the critique group, I don't have $50 to pay somebody. So I just, hope that the Catholic education comes through.
Effective bill. Those rulers on the knuckles over grammar are incredibly effective, at least for me.
Yeah, but no, I think this is very informative, especially for those of our members who are probably aspiring to beyond, self-publishing or small press, and write more literary fiction than I do. I would not put myself in that category at all. I mean, it's a fun read. That's all I'm looking for.
I want to say that's what, that's also for me the case. Like I read a ton of science fiction and, mystery. It's so I don't, please don't leave this thinking that I'm some literary fiction snob, because I'm really not.
No.
I really love genre. I prefer genre. I cut my teeth on literary fiction, and I always thought I was so stupid because I didn't understand why this was so good. I just, I love literary fiction when it's engaging, but literary fiction can be a snore.
Yeah.
I love good reading. So I'm just echoing what that part of what you just said that I firmly adhere to.
Elaine tells a really good story, and she just got her first book published with a small press. And her
congratulations!
Thank you. Yeah, very, very pleased, very blessed that someone took the book. The nuns that are in the book, they paved the way for that. But yeah, so.
What's the name of the book?
A Haunting at Marianwood.
Ooh, that's a great title.
I'm sure someone else told me that was the title. I don't think but Marianwood is a mother house for an order of nuns, and it's based on my college experience, because every girls' college all
Has a
girls
haunting.
colleges has at least one ghost, if not more. And this isn't really a ghost story, but it has that element in it. And I wanted to play that up because of the nuns.
Yay,
You know.
there
Oh,
it is.
thank you. Thank you very much.
Sorry,
Yeah.
she started talking because somebody said Amazon.
Oh.
Um,
That's great. Oh.
Congratulations. That's wonderful. It's really great.
My mother, if she were alive, would be just so happy. Actually, she would have been happy with the first one that I did publish, Create Space. You know, I use Create Space mainly because I wanted to publish it before I turned 70. And I thought, I sell books for a living. I work for Barnes and Noble and everybody else. I've been doing it for a long time. So I know that end of it. And I've met a million authors, not quite a million, but close, and have heard their experiences, you know, send it off, find an agent and all that. And I really didn't think I'd live as long as I have. So I figured there's no way in hell I'm going to look for an agent and an editor and stuff like that. I mean, I had some friends read the book, and I was with the Sisters in Crime, and we had a different critique group than we have now. And they gave me suggestions. I followed them. And I had a woman that worked with me. She had published vampire erotica, which is a whole different genre. But she showed me how to set it up on Create Space, and I went with that just because I wanted to have this book out. And I made it, you know, and made it happen. And just thought up all sorts of things. I've just been, you know, I just sit down and I write these. And the Haunting at Marianwood seemed to be a good fit for this small publisher. And they took it on. So I don't know if they'll take anything else I write, though I suspect they might. But, you know, so that it worked out well for me. Now, if I were 50 when I wrote this book, I would have looked for an agent, I would have looked for an editor and sorts, you know, like that. But on a retiree's income,
Sure.
you know.
And it doesn't sound like you needed it.
No, well, no, I'm very good at dialogue. The rest of it, you know, the other things I have to put in, that's what I have to work at. But I like the mystery or crime fiction, as the Brits call it, because you usually have very, very strong characters and a decent plot. I don't want to solve a puzzle. I want you to just take me into the house with these people, take me on the journey with them. And those are the books that I like to read. And so I'm, you know, right there with it, writing that type of book. So
yeah.
But, and that's all she wrote now.
I wanted to say that if, you know, I have much more information than I needed. So if anybody has any questions that they want to email me, please ask Mickey for my email. I'm happy to answer any follow-up questions that you guys might have, like more than happy. You would not be bothering me. I'd be happy to help.
I'll sit down.
Oh, sorry. Do you have a website or anything?
I don't have a website yet because I just went freelance in January. So, but I'm gonna do that, but no, not right now, not yet.
She's too busy editing.
Takes a lot of time.
I will send Catherine's email out to the group so everybody's got it. And yeah.
Thank you very much. This was very informative.
It was. Yes, it was.